Hello and welcome to part two of this bridge in the woods scenario here. What I'm going to do on this composition today, which is the same composition as yesterday, but towards the end of the video, I was saying I really like this composition, but I think it would be a cool idea to do it in different types of scenarios, times a day, season, whatever. So I've stamped out another identical composition, not exactly identical. Here's another one right here, but I plan on doing one at night, and I thought I'd do one in maybe fall tones or something like that during the sunset. So something like daytime, whatever, high noon, something like that, autumn and sunset, and nighttime right here. So my nighttime scenario is going to be in blue tones. All right, so my general, kind of preparation for something like this would be to grab whatever media I'm doing. Okay, now I don't always pull it out beforehand, but these are the types of things that I'm doing in stages. So my first stage would be to lay down some dye-based inks, at least on the top of this type of paper right here, the semi-gloss paper. Follow up with colored pencils, because colored pencils can be applied to dye-based inks with no problem. You can't really apply water-based media on top of colored pencils very well because these are kind of waxy. And then, over the top of all that, acrylic paint pens have no problem applying over the tops of just about anything. You can write on glass with these or something like that. They pretty much mark on anything. Hello, Laura. Good to see you. Semi-gloss paper. Brand name. This is the Mohawk Everyday Digital White-Coated Silk, but for me, in terms of the semi-gloss papers, I don't find any difference between the different brands that I've tried in terms of the semi-glosses, okay? So I would say that you can use just about any type of semi-gloss cardstock, though, okay? Hello, Doctor. How are you today? Good to see you again. We're going to finish this one off in a different color scheme here, so I don't know when you logged on yesterday, but scene pre-stamped here, so you won't have to sit through that whole segment. Or if you're interested, you can watch the the building of this right here in terms of the sequencing, what to start off with first. But it's the general type of format. Start off with your main imagery, filler stamps, and then foreground, and then focal point. What is that? The 4 Fs or something like that that I mentioned in a different video. Okay, so blue color scheme right here. Hello, Jen. This one's going to be a moonlit scenario here, so I'm going to stamp out this moon coming up from beyond the trees, or kind of rising up from beyond those. So that's the one difference between this one and yesterday's imagery, okay? So I will do that I'll do it in a medium tone. Usually I recommend a medium tone. I usually don't recommend doing sky figures in the lightest of colors, because when you start to blend in additional colors around it, if you stamped it out in a really light value, I mean, which you could do, but you stand to kind of eradicate the imagery if you're blending over that imagery, with the same colors. And if it's the first color kind of within a given value range, something like this. If you're coloring with all these colors right here and the imagery stamped out in that one, you're not going to be able to see it too well. So I generally recommend medium to darker tones with this type of imagery, sky figures. Okay, so that being said, I do want to have some contrast between the moon and these trees too, so I could go really dark. I mean, you could stamp it out in black if you wanted to, but my general theory is that, if there's a certain color in a given scene, chances are the light source would be that same color. So in this case, it's going to be a moonlit scene. So the moon with all these blue tones, nighttime type of scenario, will be in blue. If you want to have it, have it more contrasty, you're stamping out a, super dramatic scene, Halloween scene, something like that, then stamp it out in black, to get the ultimate contrast established. All right, so let's see. Go over right here. All right, so we have that little moon right there. So I have my kind of bearings as far as my light source is going to be, and I'll adjust my shadow formations accordingly, okay, based on that light source right there. So just in general, but not necessarily a rule, hard and fast, is that if that's my light source right there, just in general, the there's my center of my light source. So the shadows for, say, this tree right here would be going roughly this way right here. I mean, that's if, the terrain is flat right here. So the shadow would be going this way, and the shadow being cast by this tree trunk, you go to the base of it, okay? And the shadow would be going roughly this way, okay? So, there's not too many, here's this figure right here. This already has a shadow down here, but I'll draw in an additional shadow form with my colored pencils right there. Okay, so, but before we get to that, what we'll do is we'll come into this with our base layer color. By the way, I double stamped this tree. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit blurry, but that type of thing really doesn't matter with how dark these trees are going to get. So what I always mention to people is that, if you get these kind of undesirable, unintentional types of things happening with your compositional stage, if you're going to be adding in a lot of colors or media to finish your pieces off, most of the times it's not going to matter. Now, if, this stamp here, I dropped it and there was, a shadow form of it in here or something like that, then maybe I'd have to obscure it or something like that in, additional shadow or something of that. So I don't want to drop my, my bridge down here and then there, it may have two bridges or something like that, but if you get a little kind of, registration types of things happening, don't worry about it, just work it and it'll probably disappear within the first, whatever few layers of media that you add on there. Okay, so on this scene right here, it's going to be all blues, but one of the things that I mention in a lot of my videos is that the base layer color, even in a cool tone composition blues, I don't know, whatever, aqua greens, purples, or something like that, it's not a bad idea to go into your scene and establish kind of a warmer base. I think it just makes the, I don't know, the whole composition seem a lot more kind of rich in terms of the color scheme, but also the temperature scheme of the piece, even though you might not realize from looking at the end result that, warm tone has been applied underneath everything else. And if you compare it to one that didn't have that, you'd be able to tell the difference. It doesn't necessarily make one kind of better than the other. I think it does in terms of maybe visual richness, but I don't know. Try it sometime. Okay, so in terms of a warm tone, I've been using up my Peach Bellini here. This is a really old re-inker bottle from the Ranger line, the same makers as Distressing, so same kind of viscosity with these inks. If they I don't know, rename the peach Bellini something like, I don't know, something that would go along with that Distress ink line. It would probably be really popular. But it's light and it's warm and it's a really good base coat, as a result of those characteristics right here. So, okay, so I just pulled this one out too. Desert sand or anything like that. Antique linen, Walnut stain might be a little bit dark in terms of distress inks. I'm talking about the brown distress inks as being good ones, good candidates for this base layer color. Okay, going over that really blurry tree trunk here. I just stamped this out not too long ago. So the inks are a little bit wet, but this in this base layer stage is where you would tend to get, see all that black that's kind of building up here. I did re-ink my black pad though too, so before I started this, because I knew, I'm going to be doing some large stamps, the foamies and all that, and I was going to be doing 2 compositions. I should do my base layer for the sunset scene right now too. I'll leave that for later, I guess. So I hope you're all well tonight. The holiday season, I don't know if everyone's stamping or doing any stamping at all, crafting. Maybe did some crafting for holiday cards already. But this is a good chance for me to really experiment around with a lot of different media since we're not traveling anywhere. I've traveled a lot in the past over the holidays, not in the recent years though, with the lockdowns and such, but I'm really having a chance to go around and kind of experiment with some different things. I think this will be the first almost full page scene that I've done 2 versions of before. I wasn't really doing too many full size scenes, pages, letter size pages. Just in general, I don't know if I've done, 2 dozen in my entire life. Probably, but I don't think I've done like 30. But I don't know, I've just started doing kind of larger formats a lot more over the last maybe year and a half, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But the art foamies here that were used for these trees really make quick work of large format pieces here. Okay, so this is going in. I'm kind of being a little bit mindful about that blurring potentially happening. As this gets drier, you get less ink going back into solution. And, kind of blurring on here. So utilize your drier versions of it. Or what you can also do is you can use kind of a dabbing motion as opposed to streaking like that. Hello, Linda. I'm taking my own advice in terms of scenarios with the same compositions. So this one is going to be a moonlit, cool blue scenario. I was going to say season, but it's really more time of day. A lot of times I do blue scenes, it might be kind of wintry too, but you can't, you know what I mean? These deciduous trees in here are full, they have a full canopy of leaves on them, so, you wouldn't have that all that snow in there, although I do always mention that, we shouldn't be kind of a slave to kind of, I don't know, whatever reality when it comes to scenic stamping, just, you know what I mean? Have, I don't know, a full tree full of leaves, right, in the deep snow, you know what I mean? And don't worry about it. I think about it though a little bit, when it comes to something that extreme. Okay, so anyways, that is my base layer coat. I think that is enough. I have a little bit of a lighter area right in here that I might want a little bit darker, so. And one of the things is too, when you get a little bit of that tone on here, if there's some gray, you can use that gray on here, that little black tone for doing a little shading, preliminary shading, the darker colors that we go through in here are going to transition our shadow areas anyway, but you can get a head start with the utilization of that kind of mixing of, whatever your lightest base color is in the black, just inherently right off the bat. So keep that in mind. So, you know what I mean? Don't stress about, oh my God, now you don't want to go into this and it's like completely blurring out your imagery or something like that. If that's happening, then heat set it. But if you're getting a little bit of residual tone on there, then don't worry about it. There you go. There's Montana in July. That's what I was saying. I was saying, maybe it can be an unseasonably early kind of snowfall or something like that. Just see it as something like that sort. I happen to think that, if there was a kind of a dusting of snow or something like that, can you imagine that with, like fall colors in the trees? That would be amazing. So Montana has it there. Okay, that is that. I think this paper towel has had it. I think I'm done with that. I'm gonna toss this one. I like this format here. I think I'm gonna do more stamp sketches, with full compositions, and then just color them later, because I was really able to clear out my area of stamps and my acrylic blocks. I'm not going to be looking around, where's the tiny rock small, or something like that, because the whole scene's already kind of, established. Okay, so let's go in here. Okay, now I grabbed my Memento inks right here, light, medium, dark in terms of blue. I'm going to be using my Marvy ones anyways, so I don't really know if you know what I mean? I don't really have to go through these ones, but I know a lot of people don't have Marvy ink, so I thought I would just go in with this anyway. So, let's see here. Let me see if I have a Memento Summer Sky here, re-inker. Yeah, okay, I do. I'm just going to bypass the pad here. I really don't need the pad of lighter tones because they're usually just being used to sponge or apply inks onto my scenes with, right? I'm usually not stamping out anything this light, which is Summer Sky. So I'm just going to get the re-inkers for most pads, future pads that I'm getting, unless there's unless it's a medium to darker tone that I anticipate stamping out imagery in. Okay. So a lot of people have a lot of pads, and sometimes people are looking to supplement them. They want to get brighter tones that they've seen in the videos or something like that. But they say, hey, I got a full line of Stampin' Up pads. I got a full line of, the distress pads. But the reason why people are often mentioning this to me is because they don't think, or, based on what they've seen in the videos, I'm able to achieve brighter end results. So I just told them to supplement with a few, Marvy pads or something like that, and utilize whatever, the Mementos, the distress pads, the Stampin' Up, but just throw in one or two of the Marvy inks in it, and it'll brighten up the entire range of another line of inks that might be, not quite as bright. All right. I like to use them in conjunction with one another because I don't want everything like hot blue or something like that. I want muted tones. I want a full range of brightnesses going from, dull to bright. All right, so these trees, I'm not going to be doing them in brown on this one. I'm going to be doing them in blues because it's going to look really, you know, deep into the night, midnight or something like that. Not, you know, just post-twilight or something of that sort. Okay. So I'm going to go for a pretty wide coverage of this lightest color. Okay, now here's my lighting considerations right here. I'm going to leave this area somewhat illuminated because it's, you know, it's a major focal point of the scene, having a figure in here. This area right in here, the bridge, will probably be a focal point. So I'm going to have this area in here fairly dark, so... And these areas out here too, I'll darken them in just because I want the viewer's attention to be funneled through here. If I have really light areas up in here, then, you know what I mean, they'll be bouncing around a little bit. This is going to be really simplistic here. Pathways like this, you know, it's a visual lead-in for the viewer, and they're going to go right to that and up to the moon. So that's going to be kind of the general visual pathway of this piece. So if you really want to read, you know, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm out of words. You really want to emphasize. You want to emphasize this, so you darken out those other areas like that. So in that way, you're thinking about this more like a stage than maybe reality or something like that. Okay, if the moon is there, then, you know, the water down here would be illuminated, or, you know what I mean, or something like that. I'm referencing that a little bit, but just in general, it's going to be dark and light, or light then dark, like that, okay? So get your, you know, you can get your viewer to focus on or to direct them, whichever way you want to direct them, okay? And that's the way, that's basically what you're doing in scenes. You're kind of a, I don't know, whatever, a set director or a lighting director, everything. Narrative director. Okay, so this is the lightest, I think, of the Marvy blues, at least in terms of their reinkers. This is a salvia blue. You can see it's a little bit darker. You know, here it is right down here. There's the summer sky right above. Summer sky really looks kind of warm because it's a very, very light blue. And you can see kind of the influence of that base layer color of the peach Bellini there, okay? Already the page is getting fairly saturated. Fairly saturated, which is a good thing, because the other darker tones will blend into the scene very easy now, because you're applying kind of wet into wet. See this right here? I kind of toned out the vertical edge of the bridge like that. But I'll also kind of have a little bit of tone in the back of it and have a little bit of area in the front of it illuminated by the moon, okay? Ooh, I went too dark there. Right there. I'll have to fix that with the pigment ink, the white pigment ink. It got a little darker there because this is like all black now. I don't know, maybe having all that other ink kind of sitting on here and a little bit damp, put it back into solution, you know, as it was sitting there, so I got more black on this. Spotlights, that's about right, yeah. I haven't been to a live production of anything in a long time. Okay, this is a Caribbean blue. I really love this blue. I didn't I didn't use Caribbean blue for years and years because I was mostly using the first set of Marvy matchables that came out, which I think were 30 different colors or something like that. Then they released 10 more. And, I already had my kind of workshop kit established with those first 30 colors or whatever that they had released. But then, I don't know, I found this pad because we used to sell pads as well, Marvy inks. And I started using it, and then I thought, that's pretty good blue. It really kind of livens things up in terms of just that temperature range, because it's a little bit of a, it's a bluish green tinge. So again, it's kind of going back to that thing, about having kind of a wider range of, a temperature scheme in a piece. You're doing it with the base layer, kind of warmer tones, but then you can have it just right in your colors if you have like a turquoise or something like this one. This one's a little bit brighter though than turquoise, which is why I like it. All right, so this tree was the one that was all blurry, but at this point in time, after a few tones layered over the top of it, it's, it just doesn't really matter. All right, now this is the point too where I start wondering to myself, how deep into the scene should I go with, the color that I'm applying? I have other colors to come, so I need to leave room for them. If I don't go in quite as far, then I won't have as much area, space to, or distance from the outside edge in to fill in with, but yet I don't want to make things too dark, So, I don't know, I just kind of eyeball it as I'm going along here. I tend to look at things a lot more often than with, base layer color, which is going to be a very, an important but not a significant, it's not going to be important in terms of the end result, coverage at least, okay? It'll be important in terms of the end result kind of overall tone that, we see visible, but it's going to be buried under everything. So right in here is the biggest part, because this is all illuminated kind of right here, even though I do have some little streaks in here like that. So I don't know. I think I need to go in a little bit more. Now, if you go into your darker tones and you think, oh, this is still too light in here, then you can go back and add some more, at a later time. But I like to get as much done kind of in the first pass, I guess, because that's what I'm basing my next color on too, so. All right. Same thing out here. I think I need to go darker out here, but is this too light, I wonder? Let's go into here more. Anything interesting, celestial on the horizon, Laura? Or coming up soon? Or just past? Okay, now one of the things is too, when you're using so many inks like this, and you're really building up a lot of ink, um, as you're applying it, I'm finding that the Caribbean blue is applying easier on these trees now because as I've been working other areas in here, this area's been setting up and drying a little bit more so that it's accepting of more ink. When you're stamping like wet into very damp, your ink isn't transferring onto the surface quite as fast. The Iris Nebula last night. I'm trying to remember the Iris Nebula from my books. I need to look that one up. I think that sounds familiar. Good morning, Nicole. Good morning, Nicole, for a nighttime scene here. A nighttime scenario for the same scene done yesterday, I should say. You know, I've asked you this before, Laura. Probably, but do you guys go out somewhere, or meet up with other hobbyists, research or whatever, somewhere out there, where everyone's got their scopes out and everything like that? Out here in Southern California, they all go to. I think everyone in Southern California goes to Palomar. There's this one campground out there every new moon. The Geminid meteor shower peaked on December 14th. I think I have gone out to see that one before out in Joshua Tree. It's yearly, right? I think there's a what was the other one? The Perseid. Is that it? We used to head out to Joshua Tree for those. The final time I went to go see one of them, like most of the campgrounds in Joshua Tree were really full. I don't remember which one it was, but we had to stay at this crummy, one of my least favorite campgrounds in Joshua Tree, which isn't even in the main park. And then the showers started happening so late. I don't know. I might have waited to see like one, and it was, I don't know, it was like whatever, 2 in the morning or some 3 in the morning or something like that. And I just went to sleep. And one of the guys that was out there camping with us said he stayed up, and he said, yeah, they were like at some point in some time you saw several a minute. I think that was closer to like 4 or something like that, or whatever it was. Oh no, the last time I went out there was late. Oh, was another time, and with social media and everything like that, there were so many people out constantly just streaming in at all hours of the night. It was driving me nuts. Out in the campground too, when you're trying to watch the meteors, people are driving in, you know what I mean, at whatever times, you know what I mean, with their lights on, because they have to be able to see, of course. But oh my god, it drove me nuts. There was a gazillion people. Because I was used to having like whole areas all to myself, 20 years ago. Okay, so filling in. I'm working a lot with this Caribbean blue because this one's a pretty bright, significant blue, and it really reads really well underneath um, the other layers to go on top of it. Okay, so one of my favorite blues. I don't know, use whatever your favorite blue is, a lot. So we've worked through these colors right here. Okay. Let's see if the 10. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to use every memento because they're the lighter versions of the Marvy ones. I sometimes I stopped I started using a lot of the mementos though at one point. The Marvies just because they weren't as popular out there, so a lot of people didn't have them. But on something like this, just use whatever you have. Just grab all of your blue tones, and hopefully you have, 3 blue tones. They're, blues, light, medium, and dark blue are pretty popular colors to have. No matter what kind of branding or brands you have. Okay, this 10 blue is really showing up. This is another one of those blues that I recommend to people. It's just a super bright blue. It's super saturated too. I don't want it over everything all the time, if I'm doing like a foggy, diffused kind of evening or something like that. I don't necessarily want everything bright, so I'm not saying that brighter, is better, for every scenario. But that being said, you can dull out a bright tone, but you can't necessarily make a dull tone brighter, though. You can dull out a bright tone just by using kind of a drier application of it. Or you can water it down if you have a re-inker for it or whatnot, or you can squirt a little bit of water into your sponge, your ink applicators, ink blenders, or something like that, and it becomes a watered down version of it, and it becomes duller. Prescott Astronomy Club. Okay, got it. The Perseids are at the end of that. That's the one that we always used to go see, I think. But I don't know if we saw the Geminid ones. I'm trying to think of a really super cold night out at Josh. That might have been the one that we checked out where I went to sleep because it was probably so cold. I do remember for that one I didn't even set up a tent or anything like that. I just slept in my car when it was super cold out usually. Um, I didn't bother with tents back in the day. All right, that is the number 10 blue. Okay. Light blue. It's really more of a medium blue. I think the salvia looks like a light blue. But this one's, that right there, it's not that light. So I would have called it something else if I were Marvy. Marvy pads never really they were late to the game in terms of the raised die base pads, um, vivid pads. I don't know. There were all kinds of other pads being released. Adirondacks might have been out early. Printworks had their own line of inks. And I'm trying to think of some of those other brands of inks, like those ink pads that were they were like in an S curve or something like that. Those ones were out at the time. So there were a lot of ink brands that were being marketed really heavily for the crafting crowd, the paper arts people, stampers, maybe not scrapbookers at that time. But, Marvie, it was just one of the 1,000 products of theirs where, some of those other manufacturers for ink brands, that was their main thing, like Ranger, they were an ink company. Marvie has things like, these self-healing cutting mats right here and stuff for the general art market, kids art, everything. So they just never really caught on too much. They didn't have like design teams or, stuff like that. So, but their inks were just really fantastic. They were the same inks that they use in all of their different products. So, just a long-standing type of thing. So, and now they've been discontinued. Even their pens. I was shocked with the pens. The 1500 series getting discontinued. It doesn't surprise me too much, though, when I think about it, though, because there's so many other dye-based, watercolor pens out there these days. Super inexpensive and, pretty decent quality. But targeting those adult coloring book markets, look how bright that blue is right there. That's a Prussian blue. It's insane like that, just as is, but I'm going to be putting some black over the top of it so it won't read that way. But we're going to need a lot more blue in here. I'm going to do that with, I didn't even think about the alcohol pens. I can come into into this with alcohol pens in addition to the watercolor, the colored pencils, not the watercolor pencils. All right, let's start to I'll kind of add a stronger vignette in here too. Prussian blue really stains. You can get in your fingers like that. And it's like, oh, this ink isn't washing out as easy as some other blues of equivalent whatever value. Okay, I don't know, whatever makes Prussian blue so bright is it really stains too. It comes right off for me with a pumice sponge though, so it's not really a problem. This is the kind of coloring you like to do, no detail. It makes it easier, huh, Linda? With the use of the the colored pencils, though, I find that we're able to do a lot more just kind of area types of coverage where I just I go into kind of the more detailed areas just with the with the markers, alcohol, acrylic, and I guess those would be the two. I'm not really using my dye-based ones to do that. But okay, I'm taking a look at this right here. Super blue right here. And again, we need some much brighter blues in here, but I'm not going to dare come into it with this because this is just, it's just too, it'll stain too, it'll change an area too instantaneously in the lighter areas where there is not a lot of contrast or where there's going to be a lot more contrast between this and the background. So again, the finer types of applicators for this area in here would be kind of a better choice. But I do want to get as much done with these blues and these inks as possible because it's just going to make things go by so much faster later on. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend like my whole time coloring this whole thing with, 5 layers of colored pencils, fine tip colored pencils. So kind of just the general areas are so much faster with this type of, wide applicator. All right, let's see. Light pollution. Yeah. That's That's one of those things I really like. Speaking of that, Nicole, it's that when I go camping, a lot of times I used to go camping in areas where, for me, is my most desirable places to go, where the places where there weren't too many people, or we're just really far away from, you know, urban lights or anything like that. Um, Joshua Tree is a little bit of compromise because there are, the city's right there, and that whole kind of desert hot springs, Palm Springs is over the range of mountains, but it was dark enough out there. But just in general, I for my favorite camping, I used to like going out to this place called the Mojave National Preserve, which is not a national park, so it's a little bit more rugged and not as well known, and just void of people. If you were going out there, you really had to gas up while you could and take an extra can of gas, because you might be, an hour and a half away, 2 hours away from, the nearest service station. So, but it's the night skies, yeah. It's I love those night skies out when I'm camping. It's like, man, I haven't seen, that type of night, or sky, that type of, the stars in a long time. When I started camping a lot. So the nighttime sights and daytime or nighttime sounds, just, quiet or just natural sounds. I love that. All right. I'm going on with black now, okay? But this is where it's going to right now. This is where we're at with the dye-based inks. I'm trying to get a really good saturation right here, but it's just not applying because these trees are so damp with ink. I don't know if it's... I don't know. I don't think we've achieved super saturation, but we're kind of getting there. These inks do dry reasonably fast, though, so, if I just wait a little bit, or if I heat set. I don't want to heat set, though, because I like it a little bit damp, because everything blends together a lot easier. All right, let's see. I'm trying to, now that I'm on black here, I'm trying to really establish these shadows a lot more. Right in here and right in here. And see, I'm kind of building out this, I don't know, whatever, this little bit of a shadow, whatever shape going into this tree right here. So it really kind of plants it, so to speak, into the setting, giving it some visual, strong visual weight. All right, I think that is it, though, with the dye-based inks. I just don't think I'm going to get any darker than how it is right now. And I want to get darker in these trees right over here, these smaller trees that this is just not really conducive for. So let's go into it. Let me grab some of my alcohol pens. I might use a little bit more ink, but dye-based ink, but probably not. So light shades of blue like this. Glad you like it, Jen. It's coming around a little, ever so slowly but surely. Like this. See, I can get right on the edge of the tree with the pens here. You can kind of establish a little bit of a shadow right down here. It's not changing it too much because this area underneath here is already darker than this version of blue, okay? Let's go on the side of this right here. Let's bring a little bit back. Let's bring some of these now into these trees here. It's just a really light shade. It's almost invisible even to me right here, but it's probably I'm guessing that's like it's between a 5 and, I don't know, 10% version of blue. So really quite light, maybe between 5 and 7% maybe. If I were to guess, I don't know for sure. Maybe 5. So just really light. So in other words, it's kind of, you're hitting it with, whatever new media you're using. I'm always just starting off with the lightest tone and applying it. And again, because you can always go darker. Now what I do with the alcohol pens is not really on this paper. It's easier on the like a glossy or something like that. But you can go back in and blend in a little bit of this. You know what I mean? It's a matte paper, so it's not like you're going to be, blending on Yupo paper or something of that sort with the alcohol pens. But, if I go into it with like these two colors and this one's kind of, it's a little bit too harsh, you know what I mean? Then you just go back in with your lighter tones and just kind of blend it out a little bit. Okay. So with this one right here, I'm going into my shadow areas. This one is really bright, so I want to be a little bit careful about that. I don't want to apply too much of it. It's like, oh my God, that's really affixed and, soaked into the paper where I can't manipulate it and blend it a little bit if need be. I'm going around into the shadow areas of the trees. Okay, so if it's stamped out in black there, I'm going into that black and then building it out a little bit from that darker little area. Kind of, yeah. I almost don't want to come into here a little bit because this area in here is lighter, like these little grassy forms, but we do need to define some of it a little bit more. Okay. So this is kind of like, if this were painting, this would be called like scumbling. It's where you're just going to go in like this, a little bit like that. But then we'll blend out all those little marks too, if we can, or try to. And if I can't blend it out very well, then the paint pens will take care of that too, so. So just going right into these shadow areas down here. All right, on this tree. Here. I almost feel like I'm painting, speaking of these, brush marker tips like this, but kind of on these larger scenes like this, it almost feels a little bit reminiscent of, kind of a painting experience. It's probably because, the size of these pieces. All right, now this alcohol ink, it's going to dry shiny and not necessarily blend in, but I also was mentioning in my video yesterday, when you're doing these multimedia types of things, if you're going to spray seal it, the spray sealant will kind of unify, all the different textures on here much more than how they look, than just naturally applied and dried. Okay. All right, Laura, have a good dinner. Laura and her husband do a lot of astronomy. I forget how many telescopes he had that she mentioned. Or he had at one time. It was a lot. All right. that was that darker blue. Let's go in with the lighter blue now and kind of blend that out a little bit. It doesn't look too bad. If you look close though, it's real, you know, it doesn't look good. Like, can you see all these little marks in here? So that needs to be, all that needs to be blended out. So I'm just blending out with, I usually don't use my blender pen. I hardly ever do. I usually just blend with a color that's lighter than whatever color I'm blending out, you know, because I figured, you know, I might as well make use of, oh, I don't know, whatever the other colors of, you know, the color scheme that I'm using. Because if I'm using the blender pen anyway, it's dissolving and putting back into solution, you know, that alcohol ink that's already on there. So, I mean, you know, the blender pen picks up a lot of that color anyway. So it's like you're coloring with a lighter version of that color, right? So why don't you just use that color, you know, or something like that? Just inherently, then you're not just diluting whatever version of color is already laid down there. So light blue or medium blue is being, you know, blended out with a lighter version of blue. So you won't lose quite as much kind of intensity as you would using just, you know, whatever alcohol. It's, you know, whatever's in that blender pen. You know, these are alcohol markers, so I'm assuming it's just, you know, just the binder of alcohol without any pigment in it. Okay, so you see we got a little bit brighter in here, you know what I mean? It's livening up this area in here a touch. You can go in here too with your warm tones too. Maybe I'll do that. I'll hit it with oh, let's do this right here. Okay, so this is a little bit of, this is apricot. Okay, so I'm going to put a little hint of some apricot in this moon right here. I don't know if you can tell that at all. I'll put a little bit of white onto that rooftop. I mean, apricot onto this rooftop. Onto some of these trees that still have retained a little bit of white, you know, not too much. And I'll come into this area as well down here. So warm tone again, right? But much more of a targeted application of that warm tone. Right here, here. All right. Now I didn't put it everywhere in that moon because I want, you know, some of that white of the paper to still show a little bit because I'm going to use some white pigment ink down here. And if there's not, and that the light source is not white, then that white around in here doesn't really make sense visually. It you know, it looks out of place, you know. Okay, so let's see. Usually when I'm doing this, doing something with the alcohol pens and or colored pencils, I usually forget one or the other. I usually do, it's like I apply a bunch of colored pencils, like, oh, I could use some alcohol pens. Or I use the alcohol pens. And as I was doing that, I was already thinking ahead to the pigment ink pens, or the acrylic paint pens, and just forgetting completely about the colored pencils for some reason. It's like one or the other or something like that in my head, I guess. Okay, so that being said, I need to get a little bit darker now. I'm starting to see this in here. These trunks are a little bit too blue. I just want them to look like they're kind of in the darkness, not necessarily blue trees, okay? So let me get a little bit darker now that this initial layer of dye-based inks are dry. And we'll go in here like this. And then I'll come in and hit it with some black colored pencil as well. But see this right here? how that black is much darker now, like that. As opposed, like see this tree right here, it's like too blue on that side. I need to establish that as being just kind of the color of the, the shadows. Here, let me do this right here too. I just don't want to go out into that side area behind this tree. All right, there that one is. If you make some area of your scene darker or an object darker, then the other areas or objects within the scene look one step lighter by contrast, usually. All right, let me see. That black's working out pretty good. Let me go into this covered bridge a little bit. And maybe I'll hit that. Okay, that darkened a little bit in the back there, but I'm not going to do that. I just thought, oh, let's do that with the colored pencils. That'll be so much easier and more exacting. All right, bottom left and right corners too here. I probably should go darker down here. I'm kind of leaving it the same. It's roughly the same value as yesterday's scene, but yesterday's scene is like more like high noon, you know? So here's yesterday's right here. Okay. Yeah, see that amount of lightness right here? I mean, it's different temperature range, but yeah, this needs to get darker in here, I think. I should hit it with more smart blues rather than just going straight into it black, but I don't know. I have my black tool here. Upper left and right hand corner. I didn't do my overhanging tree limbs in here on this one. I thought this one's going to get a little bit too dark. So I didn't want those extra leaves in here because there wouldn't be, there's not going to be a lot of contrast in here. So it would have been dark leaves against a dark background. So I just left them, out. All right, I think that is it with the black for now, at least. Probably it. Now let's go into it with our colored pencils and really refine kind of our applications, color applications in these areas right in here, and the grasses and whatnot. Prussian blue may have a bit of cobalt in its makeup. Do you think that's what it is, Nicole? I've always wondered what it is about the chemistry of that that ink. Cobalt would be the thing then, that comes to mind for you, huh? I have no idea. I'll look that up. I'm kind of curious, though, because I've always wondered about that throughout the years. There were certain chemistries. There were two colors with Marvy inks that were just noticeably different. Just in terms of, it seemed like their makeup, it was, I think, Rosemary, which is a pinkish tone, and that pad, the pad for those ink pads, I didn't notice it with the pens because I don't think I have the pen version of it. Like the Tombow, the La Plumes. And but the pad or something like that would develop those little, I don't know, whatever those little things are, those little nodules on the ink, like something was happening to the ink as it sat in the pad for, not right away, but over the course of a few years. I'd get these little things grow. I don't know, it sounded gross, but they were like these little things growing on the pad, like this little ink nodule or something, like an ink wart. And that would all be only with that one pad. I think it was the rosemary. It was either the rosemary or oh, I don't think it was the bubblegum pink. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the rosemary. But there was something to that one and the Prussian. I noticed there was something too with the Distress ink blueprint sketch too. There's something in this one, and this one's kind of similar to the Prussian blue. So this one it just cuts through anything that you've already laid down, and it really leaves a really strong mark. Okay, this is a kind of brighter blue here that I'm applying. It's a warm blue, kind of similar to the Caribbean. I think it's a real happy-ish blue, not to be too Bob Rossi or something like that, but it does warm things up a little bit and makes it, I don't know, there's a kind of a jewel-toned kind of finish to this, and it's this one's aquamarine, but a little bit of a warm tone within this color scheme here, or color. Let's see, I'm going to color that horse's rear end with that too a little bit. We'll bring some of that color into that. Okay, but see, I can refine my areas in here in the open areas much easier with this colored pencil. Something very exacting. Going into that. This area down here is kind of muddy looking, with those blended black tones kind of mixing with the peach Bellini and what was it, the summer sky and all that. So this is kind of remedying that for me here. All right. See, you get that nice bluish tinge right there. I think that looks pretty good right there. And let's bring that into these other areas too a little bit, and the grassy kind of slopes right here. So it kind of makes it glow a little bit with that tone, that particular blue. There's certain blues that do that, I find. Ranger had this one pad that I really used to like a lot, and it was called Ocean Aqua when it was called Seashells. But then when they changed it to the name of the Seashells line to Adirondack Lights, they called it Aqua. So, Aqua, or the Ocean Aqua from Ranger, really good for that. Sometimes you can still find these pads, these discontinued pads really cheap on places like eBay or, Etsy or something like that. But they make for, that Aqua makes for a really good base coat. All right. Yeah, that looks much better. Yeah, that looks much better from horrific. Yeah. It's kind of modeling. I have all these pencils out right now. I'm not going to go through all of these because they're not going to be needed, I don't think. But the darker you go, you just start modeling. You just kind of become a little bit more shadow kind of centric in terms of the applications. This pencil right here feels harder, and therefore it's not really applying very much. I am getting a little bit of a tone off of it, but not very much. But when something isn't applying very fast, though, too, sometimes it's good to use because, you know, it's just, it's allowing you to develop something very incrementally, you know, so there's no, like, you're not going to go like this and go, oh my God, you know, that was, you know, the wrong color to use because it's applying so slow. So you can just kind of watch it develop ever so slowly. Okay, one of these I found was really quite dark yesterday. I don't even have it. Where'd it go? It was a peacock blue. This isn't it right here. No, this is light blue. Huh. I don't know where my peacock blue went. Yeah, okay. Well, wherever. Okay, this is a light blue. Kind of developing the shadows a little bit more. Colored pencils, I don't know, that waxy kind of surface like that. I mean, they're not transparent, of course, but they seem a lot closer to transparent than opaque. I mean, yeah, opaque though. Okay. All right, let's see here. Let's go. Shadows over here. This is ultramarine. Ultramarine feels kind of hard too in terms of the. I don't know. What do you call colored pencils? Is it the lead? It's not lead, but I don't know. What do you refer to it as? All right. Let's get these trees. I'll get a little bit closer to the edge of the tree here. This little tree right here is really slender, so colored pencils are perfect for that. Blue violet. Huh. Okay, the blue violet. Ooh. This one is really soft, so it's applying like instantly, so I need to be careful about that. The colors in here are more blue-green, so I don't know how much of the blue violet I really want to use. I might use it in some of the areas around in my shadows just for a little bit of a change of. It's kind of a tweak on the color scheme in some ways. I mean, it's going to be very, very subtle. But you have blue right here, moving into the blue greens and things like that. Over this way, you're moving it into the blue violets over this way. So, you know, you just kind of, you can put a little kind of expansion on the hue range of the piece by having a little bit of a hint of another kind of whatever. Is it the spectrum of the color? All right, maybe I'll have a little bit of this down here in the shadow. So I'm trying to taper the shadow. I'm going a little bit more solid, then I'll go lighter as it moves away from the figures. I'll put a little bit into that horse too. All right, let's not use too much of that one. Copenhagen blue. Okay, the Copenhagen here, it's really soft again. So it's applying very freely. Adding in a little variation down here. Kind of variation and texture. What I'm doing is I'm going for these little kind of streaks across this road, but just very lightly. You know, because sometimes it's hard to kind of make an open area kind of interesting or, like I said, varied without it looking too clumsy. So these pencils work perfectly for that. You know, in conjunction with the other inks that have been laid down on there. All right, and I really wonder what happened to that peacock blue. Huh. I was going to say, this is black right here. I was going to say maybe something looks like something looks like, or I put it in another container or something. It's not on the floor, is it? Yeah, I don't know what happened to it. All right, here's black. Kind of enhancing the shadows in here a little bit more. All right, going over that. Was it the Copenhagen blue on this tree, so that this tree is more, I don't know, whatever, darker and not so blue-ish. Okay. Same thing with this tree. There's this tree right here, and I'm just kind of establishing a little bit of a shadow at the base of it to kind of get it to sit within this grassy area better. All these other blues right in here and black are kind of, I'm losing some of that kind of that crystalline bluish tinge that I put down there, so I'll be applying some more of that, I think. Let's darken in some of the covered bridge here a little bit more, and really to emphasize that lighting on the top of it. Okay, and yeah, we need more of this one right here. I do like the mixed media, Nicole. It seems whenever I add something into the mix, it doesn't seem to come out, so it's like the at least in terms of you know, the cardstock scenes, they just seem to be getting more and more, I don't know, kind of complex in terms of different media that I apply to them. So I mean, moving from glossy cardstock, which I haven't moved away from though, but the semi-glosses have really opened up kind of the door for colored pencils to be used. You know, where on glossy cardstock you can't use, you know, colored pencils at all. Or you can a little bit if it's like super soft. But otherwise, they just don't apply to it very well. But yeah, it just, I don't know, it opens the doorway up for more textures, textural patterning, and everything like that when you use different media like this. But I do like things like foils and everything like that, where it's like uh, Brilliance black and white ink. That's it. You know? Or I don't know. I get colored pencils are used on that too, but on some of it. But you know, some of the things, it's like, you know, really limited in terms of the media that I'm using on those, and I really like that look too. Um, Usually where the surfaces are kind of taking care of all the patterning for me, though. Holographics. All right, I think that is it. Let's move on. Thank heavens to some of the more kind of detail-oriented touches in here. Just in general, we have our lighting scheme. It's going from light. This is what I mentioned in other videos a lot, is checkerboarding. It's where you're going from light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, right? You know what I mean? You just oscillate things a little bit. Now, I'm not doing light, dark, light, dark, light, dark across, you know, a tree trunk or something like that, because the lighting is supposed to be coming from in here. So on the inside edges of my trees, I've left those kind of, you know, lighter in there. But when you have big areas like this, I just find that more interesting to block it out rather than have like one area light and then all this area out here is dark. You know what I mean? So when you have larger areas, you know, just kind of oscillate it, you know, between your light and shadow. You know, so I mean, this area up here could have been dark up here. This could have been lighter. This could have been darker, you know, lighter down here. It's just, it doesn't really matter as long as you kind of add it in somewhere, you know, to get that variation going. Okay, so going in with the paint pens. I can't zoom in too close here, but I'm going roughly on the top sides of these trees and the bushes down here. There's darker areas, you know, where I added that like darker, I don't know, whatever color it was in the alcohol inks. Now I'm doing the opposite on the top sides of it. Okay, so lower section shade, top sections light. So the lower sections would be those, you know, those darker shadows in here. So I'm going above those areas right now with light colored media in the form of the 3mm paint pens. You can use detail, you know, smaller pens, the extra fines, for these deciduous trees, especially on larger format scenes. I usually use the 3mm, just, I don't know, it's a bolder look. But I use it in conjunction with the, you know, the smaller ones too, so. But it works just with white too. You know, I'm using the colored pens because they have these markers these days, so it's good to kind of incorporate those colors into things like highlights here. This, I'm adding blue right here. It doesn't stand out a huge amount. The white will stand out even more, but I'm starting off with the blue because it's more subtle. This is where it kind of brings the scene to life too. It brings energy to it. You know, the scene right here, especially with all the different media, speaking of media that's been used on here, things can get a little bit cluttered at times or muddy in terms of the ink applications. And my pieces certainly are that way because of the amount of media that I apply to it. But this is adding kind of like nice little crisp elements back into it, so it adds that contrast back into these areas where it gets muddled. You put a crisp element back into it, and it just reinvigorates it. But it's not because I'm not covering everything up with these little dots. I'm just kind of incorporating that type of sharpness into those objects or areas, like, little like glimmery little, areas of dew or something like that, catching the, reflecting the moonlight or something of that sort. So that's why I don't worry about the my coloring work too much. I mean, I'm trying to control it, when I'm putting it, applying it, but I just know that when I go back in with something like this, I mentioned this on all my videos, I just know that when I go back in with, the paint pens and the white pigment ink, any kind of problems that might come up in terms of over-inking something, wrong inks, smearing of imagery, these types of applications take care of all that. All right, see, that's even like out here, that's like a nothing little area, but you put those little highlights in there, and it kind of brings a little bit of visual interest into those areas. I don't want to, I'm being careful not to go too overboard with it, but on this road, that it just represents a little bit of kind of like sparkly little light, reflecting back at the, reflected light. So light source and reflected light down here. And it's looking a little bit too much, but that's where the white pigment ink comes into play. Got to checkerboard those pieces there, Nicole. Okay, this is white. This is really going to stand out much more. Okay. Sometimes it stands out a little bit too much. Maybe sometimes I shouldn't shake this up as much so it won't be quite as opaque. Not that this one is super opaque, but sometimes you might want it, the colors in the background to show through, at least in a scenic stamping type of scenario. Okay, I won't put too much of this down because this really stands out in terms of contrast. And let me put a little bit up here around these trees that are closest to the light source. Okay, so it kind of brings those areas to life a lot. Okay, now let's go in, let me use these two right here. So extra fine point, blue and white. So I'll go into, I don't know if I need the blue one. Well, I don't know, I would do it with the blue, I think. because there's certain things I didn't do with that big pen. This one's a little bit lighter too. So I can kind of highlight some things a little bit more where, you know, a 3mm highlight would just be too much. Okay, so these trees right here, I'm going to try to lift this one a little bit from the background and create a little bit of separation between that trunk right here and this tree. Okay, so I'm putting these little highlights down like that. It doesn't make sense unless, you know, if I only put those highlights on this tree right here, it would look kind of out of place. So you have to kind of do it on all of the different imagery that would, you know, that would be having that same type of reflection. So I'm putting it right on this one right here. And then we'll do it on these ones over here as well. So right, and this tree right here is really in the darkness, so I'll just add a few little highlights on that. Okay, so you get that little bit of reiteration of interior illumination happening. And let's go on with these little grass clusters. This is where I really like the look of these little highlights. It's like on little grass clusters, because the grass clusters, you know, it can look, you know, real muddled. But then when you put in these little crisp little elements back into it, I don't know, it creates separation in terms of distance, and they describe the forms too. See right down here, of those little whatever tufts of grass or whatever you'd call them. I should put a string of Christmas lights on this. Okay, I think that is it with this. Let's go on with the white. The white is going to be the main star of this in terms of the highlighting here. Oh, thanks, Linda. All right, let's see. Let's put some highlights on top of this rooftop here. A little bit of texturing. Okay. On these trees. Really where they're capturing a lot of that moonlight. I can put some on the tree. The silhouettes of the trees too up top. It's going to start looking a little bit too busy, but again, that's where the white pigment applications come in. Defining some of these rocks down here. Just kind of coloring them with a little bit of white because they became like all blue in that area. So this just goes in and adds highlighting to them, and it makes them pop out from the background. Okay, what happens in these paint pens, what I was mentioning yesterday, is there's so much media on here, you can start digging, you know, some of that, the wax of the colored pencils. If you're drawing on there, it starts getting clogging the tip like that, so just kind of get it flowing again. Let's see. There we go. And a little bit more. There we go. Just give it a good, you know, whack. There, perfect. All right, so see, it kind of brings those little rocks to life in there. Ooh, maybe a little bit too much, huh? But again, that's where the white pigment ink will go in there. Okay, now these little tufts of grass right here, let's really bring those ones to life. Maybe don't use as much of this as you did with the darker tones, the darker blue tones. I didn't use dark blue, but just, you know, the blue itself is a darker hue or value than white. And what you're saying by doing something like this is that, you know, there's enough moonlight reflecting off of the terrain, you know, to have, you know, these little sharp little bits of, you know, twinkly light reflecting back at it. So it creates a little bit of, or a lot of, kind of a visual dialogue between light source and reflected light down there. It looks, I don't know, it looks like frost or something to me. It's like creating like a little jeweled pathway or something like that. All right, this fence here. Let's bring this fence out a little bit more three-dimensionally by adding, or kind of reiterating, because this highlighting is in the design itself, so it got really dark with all the coloring that I've added over the top of it, so I'm just reestablishing that highlight back into that fence like that. Okay. And we'll do the same on this side. Like so. That really stands out. Maybe I did add Christmas lights into this scene. All right, let me see something here. Okay. I forgot to turn down my camera exposure here a little bit, but let's go in and add in those finishing touches on this piece, and I think that should do it. Brilliance white. You can use any white ink though, okay? Pigment ink, that is. And let's go into it and add in that kind of misty, kind of magical quality to it with a little bit of a textural and lighting, contrasts. Okay, get your cotton ball going and then just kind of work that ink back into it so it's not frayed and it's nice and flat like that. You want it kind of compressed a little bit too. 100% cotton ball, okay? Not synthetics. Synthetics just don't do the job. Okay, so let's start off around our light source, and let's make our light source our moon in this case. Nice and illuminated and casting kind of a soft light on our whatever terrain, I guess. See how it's glowing now as opposed to just kind of, you know, fixed like that. And then we'll bring that same glowing type of quality into this whole area down here. We're not going to add it like, you know, over the top of like a super dark tree or something like that, but we'll add it in those areas where there would be, you know, kind of a reflected whatever illumination of, you know, suspended moisture in that area. So you're adding it where there's light in these areas, okay? And what I do is I start in the light area and then I kind of creep it out into the darker areas or darker objects around it. I like it at the base of figures, you know, around their legs, and at the base of you know, tree trunks or something like that that are next to kind of an illuminated area. Like that. It just varies the, oh, it varies the visual, the sharpness of it, the texture, like that. Okay, and where I mentioned my areas in here were getting a little bit too crazy with texture, then I'm just going into that a little bit and softening some. Okay, you're not doing it over everything. Okay, here's the fence here. I like things that are going off in the distance to be varied too, so right down here I might add kind of less of the pigment ink because it's darker down here. So what we're saying is if it's all dark down here, there's not as much light in these areas, right? So you want to add a much thinner application of this so it's more kind of transparent, you know, in other words, like that. See a little tone like that? All right, let's go over here. And again, you're kind of oscillating. You don't want it like everywhere. I'm not going to put it like everywhere right here. You oscillate the usage of it. So you have some here, none, some, none. Okay. Some, none, some, none, some. You know what I mean? Like that. Let's go at the base of this tree a little bit. And know also that this white ink is going to dry, moving more towards transparency, so it won't be as light as it looks when it's been freshly applied and wet, okay? So that being said, you might need to go in, you know, and add a little bit more when it dries. Okay. Sometimes I want it really light in an area, but I just can't get it. So sometimes it's like you can spray seal it maybe, and then, you know, apply some right over the top of it to the sealant. Because sometimes I don't know if it's kind of merging or something like that with media underneath it, or just something's happening to you know, just the pigment ink in terms of, I don't know, however it dries, it just might look a little bit dry. Just put a little bit right here. You see this right down here in the covered bridge area. I even do that in daytime scenes. I think that mist looks really good, but see, it's varying the imagery where it's sharp and soft like that. Like right down here, I think it'd be good too. So it enhances, I think, things that look good. But one of the good things about it too is if there's anything that you don't like about a certain area, you can also kind of bury it. You can obscure it a little bit with, you know, some pigment ink. All right, but that looks pretty good, I think. In terms of the application of this, I'm adding a little bit more. I like that kind of that strong illumination there. I think that looks pretty good. So let's add in a little bit more. Like that. It's looking like a little bit more magical looking to me. Okay, now this area up here dried and got darker, so I'm just applying another coat up here. See those trees up there, how it's really light and dark like that as it moves away from that light source. I think that is it. So we have our nighttime version of this scenario right here. And we'll do a daytime or a fall foliage type of scenario on my one remaining layout. I don't want to do it 4 times. I'm not doing like the 4 seasons here. So this one is the next one, and I'm thinking of fall foliage in maybe sunset tones up top here, like a little bit of yellows or oranges or something like that, pinks, I don't know, something like that, and having I don't know, some fall tones right up in here, kind of reiterating that warm color scheme. I don't know, I guess in here I do like brownish tones instead of just doing it all green. I don't want it to look too much like the first one, so yeah. All right. So I can't wait to see these too when they're spray sealed, to give a little bit more of a unification of media. Although it doesn't look too bad, but the trees out here look really flat. It looks a little bit darker on the screen right now, but I don't know if you can tell. See, it's like a real flat black out here. Like here, I'll show it, next to a black pad or something like that. See that? So this right in here would probably get to be a much stronger black. And the colors right here might get a little bit more kind of intense with a good spray sealing right here. So I'll do it with the Krylon. And again, I was contemplating on whether or not I'd do it in like a satin spray because this, paper is not glossy, or if I'd spray it in gloss. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm going to look online and see if there is a Krylon UV resistant clear satin. I think it might just be matte and glossy though. I'm not sure. So, yeah. Glad you like it, Linda. I like how this one came out. Just in terms of a second scenario here, I think my preference for this one is probably, this one, just because it, has a wider spectrum of light. But, these are supposed to be, you know what I mean? They're kind of, I don't know, not a triptych or anything like that, but just a different scenario right here. I really like the composition, but so I really wanted to kind of explore it just in terms of the different, whatever, times of day or something like that. Says situations. There we go. Like that. Yeah, that black out there looks really flat right here. I mean, it does to me right close too, but yeah. All right, so anyways, hope you guys like this one. And I'll do that, what day is today? Tomorrow's the 23rd. I was going to say tomorrow's not Christmas Eve, is it? I think, on this one right here, I might add a little bit of a warmer tinge to it. Go in here with like a little bit of the greens, I think. I think that needs it here. I'll figure it out. But something like this to give a little bit more of that aqua tone down in this grassy area. I think that might be interesting. And I don't know. Then I can use something like this in there too. I think it's stand to use it because we already went in there with like the Caribbean blue, which has a kind of a warmth to it. And again, it has that base layer coat of that warm tone. So I think I don't think these would look too foreign in this color scenario right here. So anyway, thanks so much for joining in. Look at my fingers right here. That's a lot of blue inks in here. So fun stuff. Thanks for joining in, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the whatever night at the bridge. That's a horrible name for it. I don't know. Nighttime forest bridge, or what did I call it? Bridge in the forest, or I can't even remember what I did. I named these things and I don't even think about it again. So yeah, one more to go. And a little bit of refinement on this one. Now that I look at this one's so much richer. I need to bring some warmth into this one, Otherwise, this one will look a little bit, dull, I think, by comparison. All right, thanks again, everyone.